when it comes to chess blunders, it's not only possible, but it's expected for the human mind to be making the same category of mistakes over and over again. And it's still possible to be aware of the mistake each time and yet see little to no improvement. And so what we need here is deliberate training if you want to stop blundering for good. So let's break down with a few examples what deliberate training looks like. So here is a game. It's between two 1300 rated players, and white just played e takes d5, which is a blunder. And Matt, I'm quite sure you can solve this one. Why is it a blunder?
So after e takes d5, the first thing I'm looking at is, can black capture back with the knight? Because I see there's a fork, queen and bishop. Is that kind of the path I should be taking?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'm thinking, okay, so we have a 3-point knight attacking a queen that's worth 9 points. So this queen has to move. And I'm looking around and I don't see any amazing squares for the queen. She probably has to retreat. But now, the next thing I noticed was knight takes e3, forces queen takes e3, and we have this classic queen and king lined up on an open file with rook e8 available. So to me, this tactic does jump out at me with my pattern recognition.
Yeah, it's a little bit long, but for you, the pattern recognition saves you, and you can quite quickly see why it's a blunder, because there's a fork, there's a capture, and then there's a pin. And this is the first level. If say you have a student that makes such a blunder, this is the first level in which you fix your blunder. That is just analyzing it on a technical level. But to be very clear, that's not nearly enough for improvement, because this only makes you aware of the blunder, right? It does not introduce any deliberate training to rectify it. So let's get straight into it. Here's what you want to do after you make a blunder. Once you understand why it's a blunder on a technical level, you want to understand why you made the blunder. And so you want to ask yourself, what exactly did you miss about the position? Now, I do not know what white was thinking here exactly, so I can only make a few hypotheses. So if you go back to the initial position, the first hypothesis I can make is white underestimated the e-file, not realizing it could become a problem so soon. Another hypothesis, white could have underestimated the vulnerability of the e3 bishop, or overlooked the absence of an f2 pawn, because normally the bishop is safe and you're just used to that. And f3 is such a subtle change in the position that it can be difficult to realize anything is different. Or maybe white was caught off guard by the speed of this tactic. Now, because I don't know what white was thinking here, I'm just going to make an assumption that white underestimated the importance of the e-file. So we've got step 1 and step 2 covered. The first one is identifying the blunder on a technical level, and the second is identifying why white made the blunder specifically. And now comes the part about deliberate training. What white should do to sensitize himself to the weakness of the e-file. And the way to do this is, from the starting position, visualize e takes d5, and just have your attention drawn to the newly opened e-file. And notice how vulnerable the king is. Notice how the knight can get out of the way of the e-file very quickly and then use the rook. And you can sit on this idea from anywhere between, say, 10 seconds and 2 minutes. And what you're doing is associating any pawn capture that exposes your king with directing your attention to the file the king is on. Because at 1300, seeing the tactic is not that difficult. It really is just a matter of associating e takes d5 with an open file, drawing your attention to the open file. Because once your attention is drawn to the open file, the rest is easy. And that's it really. That's the full exercise. So just to recap, every time you make a blunder, there are 3 steps. First, understand it on a technical level. Appreciate the moves. Why is the blunder a blunder? And most people stop here, and that's why they don't see much improvement. You can take it to the next level by asking yourself why you specifically made the blunder. This part is personalized and requires some introspection, and try to recall what you were thinking at the moment. 2 people can make the same mistake, the same blunder for different reasons.
Yeah.
And when you take the time, not just to understand your weaknesses, but deliberately rewire your intuition, that's when you can see real improvement. So in this case, if the e-file is the problem, then you sit on this position for a while and find ways to draw your attention to it.
And
And yeah, please.
a couple other reasons that I just thought of looking at the position. One, white looks like they have moved a lot of pieces with their king still sitting on e1. So something about a delay of castling and kind of lack of awareness of the king's safety. We see the f pawn moved up for white, the a pawn's gone, the c pawn's gone, the d pawn's gone. Like a lot of movement has happened, and the king's on e1. That was the first thing I was thinking of. And number two, sometimes players are just afraid of tension, and that alone could be a reason for white to take, even though it's actually making the position worse with the knight hopping in.
That's true. And it could feature in a form of meta-analysis, right? If, say, you're white here, and you realize that you're getting into so many positions where you need to avoid blundering, then you could say probably there's something wrong with my strategic understanding of the game or the way that I'm playing my openings. Because nobody should be struggling to not make blunders all the time. You should be cruising half the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think
So, yeah.
if it were a low-rated player, I would be focused on getting your king castled more quickly. If you're not castled and your a pawn's gone in this position, it's like something went wrong.
Yeah, and that's the benefit to looking for personalized diagnosis on why you've made the mistake that you made. Because once you rewire your intuition, you're unlikely to make that entire category of mistakes ever again. If you're committed to castling fast, you will have very, very few instances where you find yourself blundering because your king is uncastled.
And one thing that we talk about with chess goals a lot are takeaways, overall takeaways from your game. And it sounds like you're saying kind of you can use these types of blunders as takeaways as well. Like what takeaways are you noticing in your blunders from this game, and is it occurring in other games in the future too?
Yeah, exactly that.
All right, should we
And
go?
because especially when it comes to classical games, you give the highest level of analysis as your recommendation, right?
Yeah.
And that's when you have an Excel sheet of all your games, and then you leave a little tag as to why you lost each game. And then you can see patterns across all your games at a glance.
Yeah, there was a stretch where I fell for two back rank mates, like very simple back rank mates over the board in blitz games. And I was thinking, I need to train my back rank mates. There's no reason this should be happening, like two elementary blunders in a very short period of time. I just, got a little lazy, I guess, when it came to calculating them.
Oh yeah, pattern recognition is a big part of not making blunders as well, which ties in very nicely to the next position,
All right.
where here black played queen to f5 because, well, I think you can work this one out, Matt.
So obviously I can see that the bishop on e4 is about to get trapped. And I say obviously because to me this jumps out straight away. That bishop doesn't have any open squares currently. There's not a single safe square. So white can play f3 and trap the bishop. But the question I have is, why would black play queen f5 there? Like, what's the logic behind that? What were they missing?
Right, exactly. Now, interestingly for this game, not only did black miss f3, white also missed f3. So we can really say this is a blunder from either side. Whether you are analyzing it from black's point of view, who allowed the bishop to get trapped, or white's point of view, who missed the opportunity to trap the bishop, the blunder should be diagnosed very similarly. First, we understand it, again, step one, on the technical level. It's very easy. Putting your queen on that square traps the bishop and you lose material. And now you only need to go on to step two. Again, because too many people stop at step one. They say, I blundered my bishop, that's it, and then they chuck it aside. You need to find out specifically why you made that blunder of queen f5 or missing f3. And Matt, if you could speculate, what do you think is the reason white and black missed this tactic?
I think the reason black missed the tactic is they got into sort of this tunnel vision mode of trying to checkmate white's king. That's my guess. I see the bishop hitting g2, and a common tactical theme is if you get your queen to g2 with the bishop supporting it, that's a checkmate. And there was no quick way to get the queen to g2 without going maybe queen f5, queen g5, and go for the mate. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
It is possible. Now, I'd prefer to reserve tunnel vision as the reason for blundering for much more advanced tactics. And the reason is that I think pattern recognition is the more fundamental level that we can speak to here. As you were saying for back rank checkmates, if you had tunnel vision and missed a back rank checkmate, I would rather fault not seeing back rank checkmate rather than the tunnel vision. Because it's very, especially at your level now, it's very difficult for you to be so tunnel vision that you miss a back rank checkmate.
Yeah.
So I would prefer to put this under pattern recognition, although again, as I said before, it's entirely up to the player on what they feel is the best reason on why they made the blunder. So let's say it is pattern recognition, and we want to figure out the third step now. What kind of personalized training can we do to internalize this pattern? And the easy thing to do is just look through that pattern a few times until you're familiar with it. And here's the thing, most people do it way too quickly. You know, Matt, nowadays, a lot of my friends have toddlers. And, you know, toddlers, they are really dirty. They just touch everything like carpets and foods.
Yeah.
So they got to take care of their hygiene, right?
Yeah.
And Matt, have you seen how toddlers normally wash their hands?
No.
Okay, they let the water run and they just splash their hands for a quarter of a second and then run out of the toilet, and then they are satisfied that their hands are clean. And now it is worth mentioning that this tiny splash of a quarter of a second is remarkably better than not doing it at all, but it's far from ideal. And they do this for a lack of understanding. They don't understand how much cleaner their hands would be with a solid 10 to 20 second wash. And it's the same thing with pattern recognition. Many chess improvers, if you're just starting or you've only played for a few years, they are like toddlers. They see a new pattern once, they glance at it for a second and assume that it has been learned. And again, I'll give credit where it's due, right? A quick look at the pattern is definitely better than ignoring it altogether, but it's nowhere close to true pattern internalization. True pattern internalization takes mindful attention, at least 10 to 20 seconds, really soaking the structure. And the more unfamiliar or subtle the pattern, the more time it deserves. You know, for even some really complex patterns, I've spent as long as 15 minutes just appreciating the geometry of it all. So the way to fix this blunder is very simple. It is mindful attention on all the details that allow this tactic to happen. But the important thing is, just like with washing your hands, you want to stick with it for a while. It's not just a quick run and go. So some of the details that I see here, if you want to know what you can be thinking about if you're looking at this pattern for 10 seconds to 2 minutes, you can see double coverage on both bishops, both the bishops' retreating diagonals, from e4 to h7, from e4 to a8. Just notice how it's blocked out on both sides. You could also notice how the queen on f5 could be substituted with a pawn instead. And it's fitting that this is a pattern, this is a blunder made by 1600s, because I remember when I was 1600 myself, I conflated the strength of having a knight on e4 with having a bishop there. And so I gave it some support in a blitz game, and then I blundered it by getting it trapped in this exact same way.
Yeah.
So this is a common pattern. It's common enough, and it's good to be aware of it.
Yeah, I think for me, the thing that I noticed too is, like you said, there's just no retreat squares for the piece. And I think in general, players tend to not appreciate when a piece doesn't have retreat squares. And, you know, sometimes it's a bishop getting trapped. Other times it's like a rook, let's say, in the opponent's position, and then a knight or some piece blockades it in, that piece can't get out. But just sort of appreciating that your pieces have mobility and ways to retreat if necessary.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a tendency to think of how we can move the pieces forward and not backwards. And this is a brilliant segue into the next position. This is not scripted at all, by the way. Matt just so happens to be making the right comments. So
I like
here,
I'm just setting you up. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, here White made a blunder, and I think you can guess what the blunder is. White was about 800, 900 rated here on chess.com.
Yeah, the first move that came to my mind, which is interesting, is the blunder, because, you know, if you do tactics trainer or puzzles, you look for this type of check when you see a vulnerable king. Queen d6, it feels close to a mate at a very first glance.
Yeah, but as it turns out,
Whoops.
it's a simple one-move blunder. This actually happened in the game. And, you might be wondering, why did I bring up such a simple and obvious blunder? And the reason that I think so much emphasis should be put on simpler blunders is that it's the fact that it feels easy to feel like these mistakes are beneath you and they're not worth your time. But the fact that simple blunders require more attention, not less, because that is where the biggest improvements come from and with the least effort. If you're watching this and you're looking to gain 500 points quickly, this is your clearest path. And here's the catch. When you're analyzing simple blunders, there's a strong tendency to dismiss them. They look so obvious in hindsight, like, yeah, I just missed that. But if you stop there, you rob yourself of the chance to fix what caused it in the first place. And in this case, for Queen d6, for this very simple blunder, I'm going to say that the most likely reason that White missed it is that they missed a backward capture. And again, as I said, backward captures, backward moves are surprisingly easy to miss. And so that is steps 1 and 2 covered. We have identified why this is a blunder, because it loses the queen. And step 2, why you made it, because you miss backward moves. So what is step 3? What will be the easiest fix on how to strengthen your muscle to spot backward moves faster?
I think you have to really just appreciate this position and similar ones, right? Like you said, go through it very slowly and try to think about the whole position. One thing that I sometimes do too, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, is flip the board and try to think about it from my opponent's point of view. Or if it's OTB, go stand over their shoulder and kind of look down at the board and intimidate them a little bit too.
Yeah, exactly. Flipping the board is the easiest way to just train your sensitivity to backward moves. And you can even see a cognitive empathy, right? How does the other person feel?
Yeah.
So you can do this on chess.com. You can do this on basically any chess server where you flip the board for every game you play. So if you're playing black, you flip to white's view. If you're playing white, you flip to black's view. And now you're reaching across the board to pull your pieces towards you, and you're watching the enemy pieces move away from you. And so this strengthens the very muscle you need to stop overlooking backward threats.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, for me, I sometimes like to try to visualize it from my opponent's point of view in my head. But I don't know if your rating is 1,000, if that's something that's very easy to do. To look at a 2D chessboard and try to think about it flipped the other way might be difficult.
Yeah, I would imagine it's difficult because when I play blindfold chess and then I decide, you know what, let me see if I can flip the board in my mind, it takes a while. And some of the things just don't go to the same spots after I flip it.
Yeah, makes sense. So if you're the same player from position 2 and position 3 missing the backward moves, then that's really something you need to focus on. You just need to keep checking in your games. Where is there a backward move, and can I keep, hashing it out over and over and over? And I love your idea of just take a position and spend 30 seconds on it. It's a simple one-move blunder, but let's just fully appreciate what's going on here and why did I miss that tactic. Like that alone is going to do better than the quick, just a silly mistake and move on to the next game.
Completely, yeah. And the good side about noticing that backward moves are your weakness is that you can address an entire category of mistakes of backward moves. If it's a pattern that you have missed, then you're looking for the specific pattern. For this, it's for all the kinds of moves that you make, all the different backward moves that you could possibly miss.
So now what's the segue to position 4?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's none. We just go straight into it.
Oh, okay. All right.
So here, I'm going to show the sequence of games leading up to the blunder, and then you can consider why did White make the blunder here. So here, Black played e5, and then there was a pawn trade, and then White played bishop to b1, missing pawn to e4, fork. Now again, these blunders that you're seeing here, I've deliberately picked very simple ones so that they are accessible. But also the key thing to understand is even if you're high rated, you can extrapolate everything I'm saying to more complex blunders as well. So maybe the blunder is not something you'd make, but the idea of how to fix it is definitely something you can apply regardless of how complex it gets. But with that, let's consider, why do you think white missed this fork here?
So what I'm thinking is, after e5, white's probably looking at the threat of e4, right? You see the pawn just came to e5, e4 is coming. But after you make a move and your opponent makes a move, sometimes you're on to the next plan and you think, okay, what should I do in this position? Maybe white wants to reroute the bishop, make room for the queen, etc. And they're just thinking, okay, I'll put this bishop back on b1. That's my new plan. Completely forgetting that threat from a move ago, pawn to e4.
Yeah, exactly. And it's down the short-term memory. It's very much like toddlers once again. Right? If they get super excited or emotional about something, you can just distract them, and in 3 seconds they have forgotten the entire project. And you see the same thing happening here. e5, the threat of e4 is obvious, but after some other intermediate moves happen, it's easy to miss e4. So that is step 1 and step 2 covered. We've identified why it's a blunder, because you lose a knight. We have also identified why this player made the blunder, because of short-term memory. So now step 3 is, how do you fix this kind of blunder? I've got 2 methods for it, actually.
Okay.
Do you want to try a guess?
So short-term memory guess, I would say each time you look at a position with some tactics on the board, you have to just think of it as a fresh position. I don't know, what do you have?
No, yeah, that's true. That is one of the methods. So I'll address a different method first, and then I'll go to your method. So
Okay.
method 1 is strengthening your short-term memory. So whenever your opponent, if we go to the beginning position, whenever your opponent makes a threat, like e5 threatening e4, you hold it in your mind like a blaring alarm, and it doesn't switch off until it's actually resolved. So you go through this a few times and you visualize the trade on e5 happening, and you maintain that mental awareness that black is threatening a fork. And so to train this, you go through the same sequence a few times, and as you do, you deliberately create some mental noise, something like a buzzer in your head saying e4 is coming, e4 is coming. And another underrated thing you can do, if you want to make it more realistic, slow down and don't click through the pawn trade so quickly. Because in a real game, you might sit on this position for a few minutes. And in those few minutes, there are people walking around in the tournament hall. The original threat is very easy to forget. So you can even simulate that time gap and force yourself to remember the original threat even after a delay. So that's the way to strengthen your short-term memory. The second method is what you said, Matt, is not relying on memory at all, but instead the ability to spot the tactic from the static position. So you don't need to remember what the previous move was. You just need to train your ability to look at a position, any position, and spot tactics on their own merit. So in this case, you would go to the position just before black played e4. So it's after the pawn trade. And it's here. If you're reviewing this blunder, you need to ensure that you're not biasing your attention. Like, look around the entire board without being drawn to black's e-pawn, and let your awareness gradually find the tactic. Because if you need to see your opponent's last move to realize the threat, that is in itself a weakness in your tactical vision, and it allows you to be vulnerable to distraction. So your goal, again, can also just be to spot threats independent of move history. So both approaches work. You either track threats across time, or you recognize patterns on sight, and whichever style fits your thinking better, you can start there. Because again, fixing blunders is a very personalized process.
And I think I realized while you're talking about it why I thought of method number 2 versus method number 1. You mentioned, so I've grown up playing classical over-the-board chess. And when you play over-the-board chess, there's, like you said, there's a lot of stuff going on in the tournament hall. People walking around, chairs sliding, people sneezing, whatever. I get distracted by some things in a tournament hall. So I'm really focused on a board. Maybe I'm spending a minute, 2 minutes. Something happens, I get distracted. And maybe you make a move and you know that move is fine, but on the next move, you know that your brain's been going all over the place and you really need to just zone in on the position. To me, it works best to just kind of look at it fresh again. I know what was happening in the back of my mind from the other moves, but I still really like looking at it fresh and giving the position a new chance.
Yep, exactly. And with that, this concludes all the examples that I have. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
Yeah, I had this fear for a second, but you haven't said it yet, so I think I'm in the clear. I had this fear that you were actually parsing through my Blitz games to find all these blunders and then saying that they're 800s, so that at the very end you could say, psych, these all came from your games, Matt.
No, these came from real 800s to 1600s. And you can just crawl through the depths of chess.com to find these very easily. So, if that's it, I will wrap the video up. Every time you catch yourself making a blunder, you want to follow 3 steps. First, identify why the move was a blunder, purely on a technical level. What did it lose and what moves did you miss? The second step, you diagnose why you made the blunder. What was your specific mental blind spot? Is it pattern recognition or short-term memory or tunnel vision, etc.? And the third is use training methods that directly target your specific weakness with the goal of rewiring your intuition. Because you're not just looking for casual understanding, you really want to transform the way your instincts work during a game. Because blunders are made when you're performing at your worst, and therefore you're really falling to the level of your instincts. And because this entire 3-step process is deeply personal, the ideal setup is having a coach or a community who can help talk you through it. And to that end, I've put a full program together you can find on the Chess Goals website, where I walk you through different categories of blunders, explain why they happen, and offer tailored fixes. And you can also join the Discord community. You're welcome to share your games and ask me directly to help analyze your blunders. The course is, what is it, Matt? $29?
Yeah, and it's on courses.chessgoals.com. There'll be a link in the description. And I don't know if you knew this, Azel. We did a survey with 150 plus chess goal students. I think it was like 156 people filled out this survey. And my question to them was, what is your greatest chess challenge? The number 1 answer was making too many blunders. So this is the perfect course for most people's number 1 challenge. And it's an outstanding course. And I love the way that you think about blunders, because so many students just think, I made a silly mistake. It's not my normal mistake that I would make, and then just move on. But really, you need to just take your time and fully appreciate why you made those blunders and how to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. So the course is just $29, but yeah, and it's such a fundamental topic that I want it to be as accessible as possible. So you can go ahead and use ChessGo's 30-day refund policy to your full advantage. You can buy it, study it, ask questions, go through the whole thing. And if it's not for you, you can just return it, abuse Matt's kindness, there's no hard feelings.
Yes, that's exactly right. Go check it out. Thank you, Azel. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Chess Goals channel. We've been doing a lot more live classes lately if you want to check those out as well. Thanks, everybody.